Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS NFL Sunday, Week 16. Like always, going to get through a few games. Not going to be able to get through them all. Whatever I don't get to, we'll talk about on the live show tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. NFL Sunday, Week 16. Let's do it. Welcome to the SWUS. Hey, get the sauce. Arizona on the road in Carolina. The Panthers are catching 4.5 points at home. Total sitting at 47. There are a couple 47.5s out there. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Arizona side. Over 65% of the tickets, about 60% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with some trends. Cardinals have been pretty bad against the Panthers. In their last 16 matchups, they're just 4-12. Against Carolina, 3-11-2 against the spread, specifically on the road at Carolina, 1-5 against the spread, 1-5 straight up. So they've struggled against the Panthers. They've really struggled against the Panthers on the road in Carolina, and as favorites against Carolina, 5-1 against the spread. So trends pointing heavily to Carolina. Trends also pointing heavily to the over. 5-1-1 to the over the last 7 meetings between these two teams. So if you're a trends person, you're looking Carolina and over. I'm not much of a trends guy, but for those of you looking for them, there they are. So let's start with the Cardinals offense against the Panthers defense. And obviously Arizona has the huge advantage on this side of the ball. Cardinals offense 7th in yards per play, 11th in success rate. Panthers defense 28th and 32nd. Here's the big mismatch right here. The Cardinals offensive line against the Panthers defensive front. Cardinals are 11th in adjusted line yards, 20th in run blocking grade, 4th in yards before contact. The Panthers 32nd, 28th. So big advantage there on the line of scrimmage for the Cardinals offense. Now, the Cardinals have not run the ball as well on the road. In their home games, they're averaging 5.6 yards per carry, 165 rushing yards per game. On the road, just 4.7 yards per carry, 33% success rate per rush. So for whatever reason, the Cardinals seem to struggle to run the ball on the road. The thing is, this Panthers run defense is so next level bad. I don't know if we've ever seen a run defense quite this bad as the Panthers are playing right now. Since week 9, they're allowing over 198 rushing yards per game, over 5.7 yards per carry, over 51% success rate per dropback. And look at the opponents. Okay, you got the Eagles and Bucks in there. Giants, Cowboys, Chiefs, Saints. These aren't dynamic rushing attacks. This Panthers run defense might be the worst thing we've ever seen. So why haven't I gone and smashed Cardinals minus 4.5? Why am I not all over Arizona? Well, this concerns me a lot. The Cardinals offensive line is in bad shape. Will Hernandez has been out. That's not new. Paris Johnson Jr., the left tackle, he's going to miss this game. Evan Brown, the left guard, he's listed as questionable. He missed Friday's practice. He might not even play. So the Cardinals might be missing 3 starters on the offensive line in this one. So that really puts us in a tough spot, because what I'm expecting the Cardinals to do is hand the ball off 40 times, average 5.5 yards per carry, and cruise to an easy victory and an easy cover here. Missing 3 starters on the offensive line definitely makes it tough to go that route. And to take it even further, one of the angles I really like for Arizona in this game is Kyler Murray against the Panthers pass rush, or the Panthers lack of a pass rush, I should say. This is one of the worst, if not the worst, pass rushes in the NFL. Dead last in pressure rate, 28th in adjusted sack rate, and that's huge because Kyler Murray has been absolutely terrible under pressure this year. One of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL under pressure this season. When Kyler Murray has a clean pocket, he's been absolutely fine, which is why this should be a great matchup against Carolina. A lack of a pass rush for Kyler Murray, that's a great matchup. They're going to run the ball, control the line of scrimmage. Kyler Murray's going to have clean pockets. I love it, but they might be missing 3 starters on the offensive line, which just kind of throws a wrench into everything I'm trying to do here. And something else that concerns me a little bit, look at the top right of this graphic. Blitz rate. Carolina, 8th in blitz rate. They blitz a lot. Kyler Murray's been absolutely terrible against the blitz. One of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL when blitzed. When not blitzed, he's completely fine. In fact, he's a top 10 quarterback across the board when not blitzed. 6th in completion percentage, 10th in yards per attempt, 7th in passer rating, 2nd in turnover-worthy throw rate. When blitzed, 18th, 32nd, 36th, 36th. Panthers blitz a lot. Now, part of me wants to say I don't care that the Panthers blitz a lot because this pass rush is so bad that it doesn't matter. And that might be true. I mean, last week, Cooper Rush was pressured on just 13.3% of his dropbacks. They didn't touch Cooper Rush in that game. He was the least pressured quarterback in the entire NFL last year. So part of me wants to say, I don't care about the Cardinals' offensive line problems. The Panthers' pass rush is so bad. These blitzes are so bad that it doesn't matter. They're not going to get to Kyler Murray. And honestly, that might be the way to look at this one. But then we look at the coverage matchup, and it gets even tougher to back Kyler Murray here. So on the season, the Panthers are 19th in man coverage frequency, 15th in cover one frequency. Now you might be saying, Kyle, why is this graphic up? That's pretty middle of the pack. Well, check this out. Since week 11, they've been running a lot more man coverage, a lot more cover one. Since week 11, they're 7th in man coverage frequency, 6th in cover one frequency. The reason I'm bringing this up, Kyler Murray's been terrible against man coverage, terrible against cover one. So the coverages Carolina's been running the last few games, this could be a problem for Kyler Murray. 21st, 24th, 27th, 32nd, 18th, 21st, 31st, 32nd. He struggles against cover one and man coverage. So how could we back the Cardinals here? I mean, this is a bad matchup for Kyler Murray in terms of coverages. They may be missing 3 starters on the offensive line. Can you count on the Cardinals to protect Kyler Murray and run the ball, missing 3 starters on the offensive line? I don't know, because the Panthers' defensive front is so bad that part of me thinks it doesn't matter. This is a confusing one, man. Tough to get a read on. Now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. We got the Panthers offense against the Cardinals defense, and on paper, these two units are pretty evenly matched. Arizona 19th in yards per play allowed, 31st in success rate. Carolina 25th and 23rd. So like I said, these two units pretty evenly matched here. The Cardinals defense has looked particularly bad in their last few games. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 6.7 yards per play, 57% success rate. That was against Minnesota, Seattle, and New England. So the Cardinals coming off a few games in a row where the defense was definitely looking shaky. And on paper, Carolina, just like the Cardinals, should definitely have the edge at the line of scrimmage on this side of the ball. 7th in adjusted line yards, 8th in run blocking grade, 17th in yards before contact. Arizona's defensive line, 17th, 19th, and 24th. So just like Arizona on the other side of the ball, Carolina should definitely dominate in terms of their offensive line creating space. But here's the problem. Just like Arizona, Carolina may be missing 3 starters on the offensive line. You can't make this up. So Austin Corbett is out. He's been out, though. That's not new. Aquanu and Robert Hunt, both listed as questionable. Neither has practiced. So Carolina, just like Arizona, may be missing 3 starters on the offensive line. So even though this Cardinals defense has really struggled against the run, I mean, the last 3 games, 5.2 yards per carry allowed, over 120 rushing yards per game, how can we trust Carolina to run the ball if they might be missing 3 starters on the offensive line? I'm copy and pasting. It's basically the same thing I said on the other side of the ball. They might be missing 3 starters here. And another thing, for whatever reason, I don't know why, Panthers can't seem to run the ball when Bryce Young's playing quarterback. If you look at the games when Andy Dalton was playing quarterback, they're averaging 5.1 yards per carry, over 123 rushing yards per game. But if you look at the games where Bryce Young was at quarterback, they don't have much of a rushing attack. 33% success rate per rush. So for whatever reason, the Panthers just can't seem to run the ball when Bryce Young's in. So overall, even though this Cardinals run defense has been pretty ass recently, I don't trust Carolina to run the ball, especially if they're going to be missing 3 starters on the offensive line. So what do we think about the matchup for Bryce Young? Is Bryce Young going to be able to throw the ball in this game? Well, as we know, the Bryce Young 2.0 experiment since week 8, I mean, he's been better. By no means would I say he's been good, though. 79.7 average pass rating, 6.4 yards per attempt. These are not good numbers. 52.8% success rate is good, though. So it hasn't been absolutely terrible, but hasn't been good either. Now, some good news for Bryce Young would be Arizona does not have much of a pass rush. 24th in blitz rate, 26th in pressure rate, 14th in adjusted sack rate. But the weird thing is, if you look at Bryce Young's splits, he's actually thrived under chaos a little bit. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL when given a clean pocket. When pressured, he's actually been pretty good. So I don't really know how to take that. Obviously, we know quarterbacks aren't better under pressure, but Bryce Young's been pretty terrible when given a clean pocket. So I don't know if I would look at the lack of a pass rush from Arizona as necessarily a positive angle for Carolina. Also, the Cardinals have been running a lot of zone coverage, over 75% frequency since week 10, 9th most in the NFL. Bryce Young has been pretty terrible against zone coverage. He's been a little bit better against man. Against zone coverage this season, 36th in completion percentage, 40th in yards per attempt, 42nd in passer rating, 30th in turnover-worthy throw rate. So he's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL against zone coverage. Arizona's been running a lot of zone. Now, if you are looking to back Carolina in this game, I do have a couple things you might like. Since week 10, the Cardinals have been running a lot of two high safety looks over 62% of the time, most in the NFL. So since week 10, no defense has run more two high safety looks than the Arizona Cardinals. The reason I bring that up is Bryce Young's actually been all right against two high safeties. Not great, but 23rd, and tied for 14th. I mean, for Bryce Young, those are great numbers. So he's actually been better against two high safety looks. Also, he's not terrible against cover two, which is a lot of what the Cardinals do. 25th in completion percentage, 19th in yards per attempt, 25th in turnover-worthy throw rate, 31st in passer rating. So he's, I guess, slightly better against cover two than his overall numbers. But, I mean, this isn't enough for me. When it comes to betting this game, I mean, this is an ugly one here. If the Cardinals' offensive line was healthy, I would be smashing the Cardinals, anything 7 or less. But the issues with the Cardinals' offensive line do make this one a bit confusing. It would still be Arizona for me at 4.5. Don't absolutely love it, but I think I will put a few dollars on it. Give me the Cardinals -4, 4.5. I'll hold my breath with the offensive line. Next game. All right, like I said, Eagles are on the road in this one. Commanders catching 3.5 points at home. Total sitting at 45.5 across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Philadelphia side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 80% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with a few trends here. And if you're an Eagles fan, you're going to like them. So the Eagles have had a lot of success against Washington. Since 2017, they're 12-3 against their division rivals here, 8-5-2 against the number. Specifically, their road games in Washington, 6-1 straight up, 4-2-1 against the spread, and they've been beasts on the road this year as well. 6-1 straight up, 6-1 against the spread. So a lot of trends pointing towards the Eagles here. That being said, Washington's been a tough team at home. They're 5-2 straight up, 5-2 against the spread, although 1-2 in their last 3. So let's talk about the Eagles offense against the Commanders defense here. And obviously, if you're talking about the Eagles offense, you need to talk about Saquon Barkley and the rushing attack. That's what the Eagles want to do first. They actually run the ball more frequently than any other team in the NFL. First in rushing frequency so far this year. And when you look at the right side of this graphic at the Commanders defense, it's a favorable matchup. Washington is 28th in yards per carry allowed, 23rd in success rate per rush. Philadelphia, 3rd and 6th. So right off the bat, looking like a very good matchup for Philadelphia offensively. The Eagles' run game should be able to get going in this one. This is a huge mismatch here. The Eagles' offensive line against the Commanders' defensive front. Eagles are 14th in adjusted line yards, 5th in run blocking grade, 1st in yards before contact. The Washington Commanders' defensive line, 28th, 29th, 31st. That's what we call a mismatch. These two teams just played in Week 11, and Saquon Barkley had no problems whatsoever. 26 carries, 146 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns in the game. So at this point, we're definitely thinking, all right, the Eagles are just going to hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley 25, 30 times in this game, just like they did a few weeks ago, and there's not a damn thing Washington can do to stop it, right? Probably what we're all thinking here. I will say, though, if you look at the Washington run defense in the last 5 games and just take out that Eagles game, they've actually been playing much better against the run. In the 3 games since that Week 11 game against Philly, 65 rushing yards allowed per game, 3.55 yards per carry, success rate per rush, 32.3%. Those are very good numbers. They've been playing excellent defense against the run since that Eagles game. And if you look at the Week 10 game right before Philly, they played great defense against the run against the Steelers as well. In that Week 10 game against Pittsburgh, 3.58 yards per carry allowed, success rate per rush under 33%. So if you look at the last 5 games as a whole, Washington has been playing significantly better defense against the run. The Philadelphia game is the one outlier. Look, by no means am I saying Washington's defense can stop Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' rushing attack. But when you look at the season-long numbers, it looks like the Commanders are bottom 10, maybe even bottom 5 run defense. I don't think that's true anymore. I mean, the last 5 games, they've been playing much better defense against the run. I don't think it's crazy that they're able to give the Eagles' run game some problems. I don't think it'll be an absolute steamrolling on the ground like it was a few weeks ago. So I actually think Washington's defensive front can hang tough a little bit. So what do we think about the matchup for Jalen Hurts? Well, when they played the Eagles in Week 11, Washington ran a ton of cover 3, over 58% of their defensive snaps. For reference, the Bucs lead the league with about 45% frequency for cover 3. Over 58% is a ton. They lived in cover 3 in that Week 11 game. Over 67% single high safety looks in that game, which I gotta say, I don't entirely understand. Jalen Hurts has great numbers against cover 3. He's 9th in completion percentage, 15th in yards per attempt, 16th in pass rating. I mean, he's been solid against cover 3 this year, and specifically against single high safety looks, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, 3rd, 5th, and 3rd. So I don't really know why Dan Quinn came out and ran a bunch of cover 3. I mean, I'm not the type of person that would ever pretend to know more about football than Dan Quinn or an NFL coach. I mean, I'm sure he has his reasons. He knows a lot more about defenses in the NFL than I do, but I don't really get it on by a numbers standpoint. But the reason I'm bringing that up, now that the Commanders have Marshawn Lattimore, they had him for the Week 11 game, but he didn't play. Now that they have Lattimore, I expect to see more man coverage in this game. On the season, they are 9th in man coverage frequency. They didn't really run a ton of man against the Eagles in Week 11. So now that Lattimore's on the field, I expect to see some more man coverage and some more cover 2, which is more in line with what they were doing earlier in the season. So I expect to see some more of that. And that makes more sense in this matchup because Jalen Hurts doesn't have the greatest numbers against cover 2. 22nd in completion percentage, 21st in yards per attempt, 23rd in passer rating. And check this out, against man coverage, great numbers, but 37th in turnover-worthy throw rate. Puts the ball in harm's way against man coverage. I expect Washington to run a lot more man coverage than they did in Week 11. How about Jalen Hurts to throw an interception in this game? That's not something I've personally placed. I couldn't find the market. I don't know if it's open yet. I'm not a prop guy, but I'd be down to bet that Jalen Hurts to throw an interception, because I expect Washington to run some more man coverage than they did in Week 11. Now, I know trying to predict what we're going to see from Jalen Hurts through the air can be a little tough. I mean, he's kind of been all over the place. Last week against the Steelers, 290 yards through the air, 9.1 yards per attempt, 68.8% success rate per dropback, over a 125 passer rating. Absolutely lights out against Pittsburgh. In the 2 games before that, he was struggling a little bit against Baltimore, who hasn't even been a good pass defense this year, and Carolina, who has one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So good luck trying to make a prediction of what you're going to see from Jalen Hurts. We do have to point out, though, that this Washington Commander defense really hasn't been all that bad against the pass. 47.3% success rate per dropback. That's not very good, but other than that, 184.3 passing yards allowed per game, 6.6 yards per attempt, an average opponent passer rating of 85. That's in their last 8 games. That's a big sample size. They've been playing solid defense against the pass for a while now. Is some of that a reflection of the competition? Maybe. I mean, you got the Panthers in there, you got the Bears, the Giants, Titans, with Saints, Cowboys. Then you got the Eagles and Steelers in there as well. So yeah, they've had a bit of an easy schedule, but it's not like this Commanders defense has been getting lit up through the air. 184.3 passing yards allowed per game in their last 8. And something I actually like for the Washington defense is this matchup here. Now, you might look at this graphic and say, this is terrible for Washington. I mean, Jalen Hurts, when given a clean pocket, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. When pressured, he gets into some problems. He puts the ball in harm's way, doesn't get the ball downfield, takes a lot of sacks. Washington doesn't generate a ton of pressure. 27th in pressure rate on the year. So how is this a positive angle for Washington? Well, the Commanders' pass rush as of late has actually been getting it together. Since Week 12, they're 8th in the NFL in time to pressure, 5th in opposing quarterback time to throw. So quarterbacks have been getting the ball out fast against Washington. And the reason I'm bringing this up, nobody holds on to the ball longer than Jalen Hurts. He actually passed Lamar Jackson for quarterbacks that hold on to the ball. He's like 4.97 seconds or something crazy, according to Pro Football Focus. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Washington. This pass rush seems to be heating up. I don't know. Look, it's the Eagles offense. They might be the best team in the NFL right now, them or Buffalo. So I'm not going to be like, Washington's defense is going to shut the Eagles down. Of course not. But I don't think it's crazy that in this tough division game, Washington's defense actually gives us a pretty solid effort here. But now we got to flip it over to the other side. And in my opinion, this is where the value shifts back over to Philadelphia. This Eagles defense is some serious shit. They're first in the NFL in yards per play, 3rd in success rate. And what makes that even crazier is they got off to kind of a shitty start. This is a full season numbers. They're first in the NFL in yards per play. After the first 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it was, they weren't even playing the best defense. They weren't even playing that well. So the fact that they're first now on the full season, this defense has been on a warpath. And the Washington offense, 8th in yards per play, 5th in success rate, they've kind of been trending in the wrong direction. Now, if you are taking the points with Washington in this game, I do have something for you, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know how much I personally take away from it, but I do think it's interesting. So the Washington run game, last 2 games, 5.9 home games, 5.9 yards per carry, over 206 rushing yards per game. They were able to run the ball successfully in their last 2 home games. Their last 2 road games, including the Eagles game, they weren't really able to run the ball. And it actually gets more interesting than that. Check this out. The Eagles, in their last 2 road games, were actually getting run on. The Rams and Ravens games, 5.2 yards per carry allowed, 129 rushing yards per game, 36.3% success rate per rush is still great, though. In their last 2 home games, they were lights out against the run. So, look, that's razor thin, but Washington been running the ball more successfully at home. The Eagles defense slightly more susceptible to the run on the road. It's something. Like I said, I don't know if I personally take anything away from that. Might just be some random numbers, but it's something. If you're betting Washington, you don't hate that. Here's where it gets tough, because if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, you actually have to answer the question, do I think Washington's going to be able to run the ball on Philadelphia? And I think the answer to that is probably not. Washington runs a lot of gap concept blocking schemes, 5th most in the NFL. Plays directly into the strength of this Eagles defense. They're 5th in yards per carry allowed, 5th in success rate per rush against gap concept blocking schemes. So it's just tough. And then you add on the fact that Washington may be without Tyler Biadasz in this game, their center, who is their highest rated run blocking offensive lineman this season, according to Pro Football Focus. So they may be missing him, which really makes it a tough sell. I know Washington was able to run the ball successfully in their last 2 home games, but this Eagles defense is on another planet right now. So I don't really think Washington can run the ball on the Eagles personally, which means we have to take a look at the matchup for Jayden Daniels. And what's the story with Jayden Daniels is the magic fairy dust seems to be running out a little bit. Through the first 9 games, the Washington Commanders were averaging 8.5 yards per pass to him, almost a 70% success rate per dropback, an average passer rating of 107.7. In their last 5 games, the numbers are significantly lower, 6.7 yards per pass attempt, the passer rating down to 93.7, success rate just over 63%. Now, those numbers aren't terrible, but in comparison to what he was doing for the first 2 months and change of the season, it's definitely a drop-off. And what makes it even worse is Jayden Daniels has only played 2 games this entire season against top 10 defenses, the game against the Eagles and the Steelers. And if you look at his numbers in just those 2 games, 196.5 passing yards per game, 6 yards per attempt, an average pass rating of 75.1. Success rate still looks pretty good, but I think these were the 2 worst games of the season of his career. The 2 worst games of the season for Jayden Daniels were the only 2 times he's seen top 10 defenses. So obviously playing the Eagles again, a top 10 defense again, tough to have faith in them. Philadelphia's pass rush is obviously going to be a problem here. They're 2nd in pass rush grade, 3rd in adjusted sack rate. Washington's offensive line 22nd and 20th. Now in the first game, he wasn't under a ton of pressure, pressured on just 28.2% of his dropbacks. He was the 18th most pressured quarterback in the NFL that week, but he was towards the top of time to throw. Meaning Kingsbury came in with a game plan. We got to get the ball out of Jayden Daniels' hands fast. And, I mean, it wasn't very successful. Washington's offense didn't look very good in that game. So the Eagles' pass rush is going to be a concern here. And overall, the Eagles' defense, I mean, it's really tough to step in front of this defense. In their last 8 games, they're allowing 16.5 points per game, 4.9 yards per play, success rate of 43.2%. The Eagles' defense has been arguably the best in the NFL over the last couple months. So with a quarterback in Jayden Daniels who seems to be trending the wrong way, defenses now have film on him. I'm not saying he's bad or a bust or anything like that. I'm just saying what we saw the first 2 months of the year doesn't seem like we're going to see that anymore, at least in his rookie season. So even though I do think the Washington defense can surprise us and give the Eagles offense problems, I do think Washington's defense is going to play well in this game. I still can't take that Commanders plus 3.5 because I don't trust the offense at all, and this Eagles defense scares the shit out of me. And the thing with the Commanders is, I mean, if you really look at their schedule, you can make the argument that other than that first half of the Titans game where the Titans fumbled inside their own territory twice, it was 28-0 Washington, like 18 minutes on the game clock into the game, like halfway through the second quarter, 28-0 Washington. The Titans gifted them 2 touchdowns. Other than the first half of the Titans game where they got a 28-point lead, you can make the argument that the Commanders have not looked very good since the Carolina game in Week 7. I mean, they should have lost to the Bears. They won on a Hail Mary. The Giants played them pretty tough. 3 losses in a row. Then the Tennessee game where they were gifted a 28-point lead early. And then last week they almost lost to the Saints and Spencer Rattler, 2-point conversion away from losing that game. So you can make an argument that other than that first half of the Titans game, Washington hasn't looked like a good team since Week 7, which is 2 months ago now. So I think I have to take the Eagles here. I see a -3 at -120 available. Probably take it. Eagles -3. I also like the under because, like I said, I think the Commanders' defense is able to keep Saquon Barkley from absolutely slaughtering them. Eagles are probably going to stick to the run here because they know they can win this game if they run it. So I expect the clock to run. Do like the under as well. So Eagles -3 at that -120. Under, is it still at 45.5? 1 second. Quick update. So the bet I ended up placing was Washington team total under 21.5, I found. A lot of books have it at 20.5, but I found a 21.5 at -120. I think that's a great bet. Washington against this Eagles defense, an offense that hasn't looked quite the same. So yeah, Washington team total under 21.5. I do like the Eagles if you can get a -3. I also think the under at 45.5 is a good look. Cleveland on the road in Cincinnati. Bengals are laying 9. Looks like mostly 9. I do see a couple of 8.5s out there. Total sitting at 46.5 pretty much across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Cincinnati side pretty heavily. Over 75% of the tickets, over 85% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So why don't we take a look at some matchup trends? And this one's pretty disgusting if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, but I would imagine if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, most of your life is pretty disgusting. 5-15 against the spread in their last 20 matchups against the Bengals. So if you've been blindly betting Cincinnati every time they play Cleveland, you're doing just fine. They're 2-7 against the spread in their last 9 trips to Cincinnati. 1-4-1 to the under in their last 6 meetings between these two teams, but 7-1 to the over in the last 8 meetings in Cincinnati. So there's a couple trends for those of you looking for trends. Anyway, let's match these two teams up on the field. We'll start with the Browns offense against the Bengals defense. There's a lot of red on the screen now. Cleveland offensively 30th in yards per play, 32nd in success rate. Cincinnati's defense 25th and 30th. This is a really bad offense against a really bad defense here. So who's going to prevail? Well, the Cleveland offense certainly hasn't looked good the last couple weeks. In weeks 8 through 13, they were actually looking all right. 6.2 yards per play, over 46% success rate. Last 2 games against the Steelers and Chiefs, 10.5 points per game, 5.2 yards per play. So the Browns offense has definitely been trending in the wrong direction. Obviously, there's been a quarterback change. We'll talk about that in a minute. I actually want to start with the Cleveland Browns run game against the Cincinnati run defense, because I know this sounds crazy. I actually think the Browns might be able to run the ball in this game. The Bengals' run defense has not been doing well. Since week 11, they're allowing 5.1 yards per carry, over 126 rushing yards per game, and that's against the Chargers, the Steelers, the Cowboys, and the Titans. Not exactly a list of dynamic rushing attacks. In fact, all 4 of those offenses have been struggling to run the ball. So the Bengals' run defense has been looking pretty bad in their last 4 games, which is kind of crazy because in the 4 games before that, it seemed like that defensive front was getting their shit together. I mean, look at the 4 games before that, 3.8 yards per carry allowed. Bengals run defense definitely trending in the wrong direction here. And don't look now, but this Browns offense running the ball a little bit. Now, it's still just a 37% success rate per rush in their last 2 games. So let's not get crazy about this, but 5.4 yards per carry, 122 rushing yards per game. That's against the Chiefs and Steelers, 2 respectable defenses. The crazy part is it's not even Nick Chubb doing the damage. In fact, Jerome Ford has been the much better back so far this year. Yards per carry, rushing yards over expected per attempt here. Nick Chubb, 46th and 37th. Jerome Ford, 5th and 14th. So Jerome Ford has been the better option for Cleveland as of late. That being said, we should probably mention one thing when it comes to Jerome Ford. Just 3.45% of his carries this year have come against 8-man boxes, fewest in the NFL. So Jerome Ford has looked like the more efficient back so far this year. Well, not looked like, he's been the more efficient back this season, but he's faced the fewest amount of stack boxes in the NFL than any other back in the league. So he's been placed in some simpler circumstances than Chubb has. But I mean, is it crazy to think Cleveland can run the ball in this game? Cincinnati just lost Sam Hubbard, another piece from their defensive front 7 gone. Logan Wilson's been out. Sheldon Rankins is going to miss another game. Now Sam Hubbard is out. So 3 starters out of that defensive front 7 out for the Bengals in this one. I think Cleveland's going to run the game. Oh, and by the way, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is playing quarterback for Cleveland. Much more mobile than Jameis Winston. Much more mobile than Deshaun Watson. DTR adds to the rushing attack. I think Cleveland's going to run the ball in this game. But the question is, what can we expect out of Cleveland in terms of a passing attack? And this is where things start to look a little dark for the Browns. On the last 2 weeks, it hasn't been good. Jameis Winston lost his starting job. 5 yards per attempt, 188 passing yards per game, an average passer rating of 50. The Cleveland passing attack has not looked good in the last couple of games. Enter Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who has some awful career passing numbers. I mean, through 12 career appearances, 51.4% completions, 3.7 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 7 interceptions, and average passer rating of 42.6. This is disgusting. Since last season, among 64 qualified quarterbacks with 100-plus plays, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is 62nd in EPA per play, 57th in success rate, 63rd in completion percentage above expected. Yeah, his passing numbers are pretty much as bad as it gets. Now, the good news if you're betting Cleveland is Cincinnati's defense. We just talked about how Cleveland should be able to run the ball. Their defense against the pass isn't any better. In fact, it's it's a little concerning. If you isolate the last 2 games, okay, it's a little bit better. They played Dallas and Tennessee, Will Levis and Cooper Rush. And even in those 2 games, 7.1 yards per pass attempt allowed, 52% success rate per dropback. That's against Cooper Rush and Will Levis. So if Cooper Rush and Will Levis are able to complete some passes on Cincinnati's defense, maybe DTR can as well. Keep in mind, we already saw DTR play against the Bengals. He came in the second quarter of this game. It was 7-0 Cincinnati when DTR came in. Final score was 21-14, and if you remember, Cincinnati started off this game with a kickoff return for a touchdown. This was basically a back-and-forth coin flip game other than that one kickoff return. So the idea that DTR is just going to get smoked here, I don't see it. I mean, this is a competitive game between these 2 teams with this quarterback in. So let's flip it over and look at the matchup for the other side. We got the Bengals offense against the Browns defense, and these 2 units may be a little bit closer than you would expect them to be. Cincinnati's offense, 8th in yards per play, 9th in success rate. Cleveland's defense, 19th and 5th. So maybe a little closer than you might think. This Browns defense has really turned it up the last few weeks against the pass, and that's against Denver, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City. 3 supposed playoff teams there. Just 210.3 passing yards allowed per game, 6.2 yards per attempt, average opponent pass rating of 82.6. Cleveland's been playing some solid defense against the pass in their last few games. And you know what? You could say the same thing about their run defense. Since week 12, they're allowing just 3.9 yards per carry, 35.5% success rate per rush. So Cleveland out of nowhere playing lights out defense. And the more I look at this one, the more I really don't like this matchup for Joe Burrow. So Cleveland runs a lot of man coverage, a lot of cover 1, a lot of single high safeties, 4th, 2nd, and 2nd in frequency in those 3 coverages. That's bad news if you plan on betting the Bengals in this game, because Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL against zone coverage, against man coverage, 25th in completion percentage, 29th in yards per attempt. How about cover 1? Overall, as you probably know, Joe Burrow pretty much a top 10 quarterback across the board. Against cover 1, 22nd in completion percentage, 31st in yards per attempt, and against single high safety looks, not as good as against 2 high safety looks. So this is not looking like a good matchup here for Joe Burrow. And to add on to that, Cleveland blitzes a lot. They're 9th in blitz rate. Joe Burrow, much better when not blitzed. Against the blitz, 14th, 19th, 10th, and 14th. When not blitzed, 10th, 12th, 5th, and 5th. So he's better when not blitzed. Cleveland blitzes all the time. And speaking of the blitz, Joe Burrow's got to worry about the Cleveland pass rush. They're 1st in pressure rate, 4th in pass rush grade. Cincinnati's offensive line, 20th and 27th. So the Browns should be able to generate pressure on Joe Burrow in this game. Here's the thing. Joe Burrow's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league handling pressure so far this year. 3rd in yards per attempt, 2nd in passer rating when pressured. And another thing, if you're betting Cincinnati that you like, is the offensive line. Looks like they might be getting Orlando Brown Jr. back at left tackle. He's been out the last couple of weeks. And also Alex Kappa's listed as questionable. Looks like he practiced the entire week, so I think he's going to play. So they are getting a piece back on the offensive line. You definitely love that if you're betting Cincinnati. But personally, I don't like this matchup for Joe Burrow. I think he's going to struggle in this one, even at home, even against the Browns defense that doesn't have the best season-long numbers. They're on a heater right now, and I like the way they match up against Cincinnati. So I think Joe Burrow is going to struggle in this game. Now, if you're betting Cincinnati, you can point at this. They have been running the ball a little bit better as of late. In their last 4 games, 4.6 yards per carry, but success rate is still down at 36%. And like I said before, Cleveland's been turning it up against the run, so I don't expect the Bengals to be able to run the ball either. I like the matchup for Cleveland's defense, which is why when it comes to betting this game, I know you look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson's passing numbers and you might think, how could you possibly bet on this guy? But in my opinion, 9 is way too many. I think Cleveland's going to be able to run the ball. I think Joe Burrow's going to run into some problems here. I think Cleveland's defense is a good match. They've been playing really well. I'm going to take the points. Give me Cleveland +9 next game. Detroit on the road in Chicago. The Bears are catching, wow, looks like it's mostly 6.5 now. I do see 1-7. But for the most part, it's 6.5 across the board. Total sitting at 47.5. I do see a couple 48s. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Detroit side. Over 80% of the tickets, over 85% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with some trends. Detroit has struggled with this Bears team. They're just 2-4-2 against the spread in their last 8 trips to Chicago, 3-5 straight up. In their last 20 matchups against the Bears, they're just 7-11-2 against the spread. In their last 12 matchups against the Bears as favorites, just 3-8-1 against the spread. And in their last 9 as road favorites, so the last 9 trips to Chicago when they are favored, just 2-6-1 against the spread. So if you're a trends person, you are most definitely betting the Bears here. But anyway, let's match these two teams up on the field. We'll start with the Lions offense against the Bears defense. And obviously, Detroit's going to have the huge edge here on paper. Third in yards per play, second in success rate. Chicago's defense 28th and 11th. We know the big mismatch is right here. Detroit's offensive line creating space in the run game against the Bears' defensive front that's been pretty weak against the run this entire season. Detroit's offensive line first in adjusted line yards, first in run blocking grade, third in yards before contact. Chicago's defensive line 29th, 18th, and 32nd. Now, obviously, if we're talking about the Lions trying to run the ball in this game, we have to mention that David Montgomery is out. That's going to hurt. No Montgomery for the Lions in this one. It looks like Glasnow, the guard, is going to play, though. He's been participating in practice. He's listed as questionable, but I think he's going to play. So the offensive line should be at full strength, which is great news because it's probably the best offensive line in the NFL when it comes to trying to run the football. But no Montgomery is going to hurt. And keep in mind, this is a Lions run game that really hasn't looked good in their last couple games. They've been struggling to run the ball. 3.2 yards per carry, under 80 rushing yards per game, 31% success rate per rush in their last two games against the Packers and Bills. So this Lions run game that looked unstoppable for pretty much this whole season, back-to-back games where they've been unable to run the ball. And this Bears defense, yes, it's been terrible against the run for pretty much this whole year. In their last two games, they're allowing just 3.97 yards per carry, just 123 rushing yards allowed per game. Look, I'm not saying the Bears defense is going to stop the Lions from running the ball here. I'm just saying Lions have been struggling to run the ball. The Bears defense seems to be improving in that department. There's no Montgomery. It's not crazy to think the Bears might be able to at least limit the Lions run game here. And also, Javon Dexter Sr. looks like he's going to play. He participated in practice on Friday, so it looks like they get Dexter back on the defensive line, one of the most important pieces there. So yeah, I mean, I think the Bears can, at the very least, put up a fight when it comes to stopping the run here. But what about the matchup for Jared Goff? Obviously, stopping the Lions run game would be huge for the Bears, but if they can't stop Jared Goff, it's not really going to matter. Well, the good news is this game is on the road at Soldier Field, where the Lions offense hasn't looked nearly as good. In their last four home games, 37.8 points per game, almost 7 yards per play, 55% success rate. In their last three road games, 24.7 points per game, 5.6 yards per play, success rate just over 47%. Still solid offensive numbers, just not nearly as explosive as their last four games at home. And specifically, it's the passing production that takes a dip in these road games. You can see Jared Goff's last four home games. These are video game numbers. Over 64% success rate per dropback, over 122 passer rating, over 361 passing yards per game. In his last three road starts, though, average passer rating of 87.5, just 218 passing yards per game. Now the 5 interception game against Houston is in there. Obviously, you're going to be skewing the passer rating a bit, but you can see here on these graphics, Jared Goff not nearly as good on the road recently. And it's important to point out that this game is not just on the road, it's outdoors. And we know Jared Goff is a vampire. He hates the sunlight. He hates being outside. These are his numbers from last year. I mean, night and day difference. In his road games that were inside, 8.1 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, pass rating over 101. In his road games that were outside, though, yards per attempt down, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, pass rating drops to 82. Not nearly as good outdoors. And the reason you haven't heard much of that, because you might be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Why haven't I heard that this year? He's only played one outdoor game this entire season. It was week 9 on the road at Lambeau Field, and he threw for just 145 yards in that game. Now, this is a little bit of a weird data point because that game was torrential downpour. Like it was raining bad in that game. So maybe not a ton to take away from there, but this game is outside at Soldier Field in the cold. That's not the type of weather Jared Goff likes to play in. In his 4 career starts on the road at Soldier Field, completing just 58% of his passes, 219 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, an average pass rating of 67.8. Now, to be fair, 4 of those interceptions came in one game with the Rams like 5 years ago, to be fair to Jared Goff. But look at his game at Soldier Field last year, which was just last season. 161 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 54.6 passer rating. This is not the type of environment Jared Goff likes to play football in. On the road, it's going to be cold, it's going to be windy. Also, the Bears run a ton of zone coverage, 5th in zone coverage frequency, over 75% of their defensive snaps. Not that Jared Goff is bad against zone, but he's certainly much better against man, and specifically, look at the turnover-worthy throw rate, 23rd against zone coverage, 1st against man coverage. So the interception problems we see Jared Goff having from time to time, they come against zone coverage. So in the cold, in the wind, against zone coverage, I don't know. I don't like it for Jared Goff, and this Lions run game hasn't looked right. I got to say, I don't like this matchup for the Lions offense. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Bears offense against the Lions defense, and no question, on paper here, Detroit should have the edge. They're 19th in yards per play allowed, 6th in success rate. The Bears offense 32nd and 27th. So no question, based on the season-long numbers, Detroit's defense should definitely dominate this game. But obviously, if we're talking about the Lions defense, we have to start with injuries, and this is just crazy. Now McNeil's out. No McNeil. I mean, he's been so good this year. They do have DJ Reader on the field, so there's something. Also, Jack Campbell's been really good this year, but 5 of their starting 7 in terms of the defensive front are out. Now, 3 of those pieces have been out for a while. Anzalone has also missed a few games now. So it's not like these are all brand new, but McNeil is brand new, and Carlton Davis from the secondary is also brand new. He's been their highest rated corner this year, according to Pro Football Focus, by far. So McNeil out, Carlton Davis out. Add them to the long list of injuries for this Lions defense. Now, good news for Detroit. The Bears offense has looked like absolute death in their last 2 games. Just 12.5 points per game, 4.9 yards per play. I mean, it's been pretty bad for the Bears offensively. I will cut them a little bit of slack. Their last 2 games were against the Vikings, who have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and the 49ers. And when you look at this graphic, you might say, Kyle, the 49ers defense isn't all that great. Well, in this game, the 49ers defense, I believe, got 3 starters back. They got Bosa back, they got Ufanga back, and I think there was a third piece. Pretty sure there was a third starter they got back in that game as well. So we all know the 49ers defense, when completely healthy, is pretty damn good. So they are coming off back-to-back games against a couple of tough defenses. Both of these defenses I would consider to be better than the Lions defense as it stands right now with the injuries. So back at home, this should be a step down in class in terms of competition for Caleb Williams and the Bears offense. And by the way, this Lions defense kind of seems to be falling apart before our eyes. In the last 3 games, they're allowing 33 points per game, 7.4 yards per play, success rate over 53%. One of those games was at home against the Bears, by the way. Look specifically at their numbers against the run. This is supposed to be the strength of the Lions defense. In their last 3 games, which includes the Bears game, they're allowing 5.3 yards per carry, over 125 rushing yards per game. Not to mention, the Bears tend to run more gap concept blocking schemes. They're 6th in gap concept blocking scheme frequency. Plays directly into the weakness of this Lions defense. 27th in yards per carry allowed, 23rd in success rate per rush against gap concept blocking schemes. So with all the injuries to the Lions defensive front, is it crazy to think the Bears are able to run the ball a little bit in this game at home? They were running the ball a little bit on the road in Detroit on Thanksgiving. Now, a big chunk of that was Caleb Williams scrambling. But still, I mean, with all the injuries, no McNeil, who's been such an important piece, I think the Bears might be able to run the ball a little bit on the Lions. But what about the matchup for Caleb Williams? I mentioned before, the Bears offenses look really shaky the last couple games. That includes the passing offense. I mean, just 6 yards per pass attempt in their last 2. Just 168 passing yards per game. The Lions run a lot of man coverage, more man coverage than any other defense in the NFL. They're also first in cover 1 frequency. Caleb Williams has some pretty ugly-looking numbers against man coverage. 40th in completion percentage, 38th in yards per attempt, 31st in passer rating. Also, pretty ugly-looking numbers against cover 1, 36th, 37th, and 32nd. 21st in turnover-worthy throw rate, I suppose, isn't that bad, but it's looking like a pretty rough matchup for Caleb Williams. Here's the thing, though. Just like the rest of the Lions' defense, their defense against the pass is going straight to shit. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 9 yards per pass attempt, over 57% success rate per dropback, over 274 passing yards per game, an average opponent passer rating over 111. So the Lions have been really struggling to defend the pass. Remember, there's no Carlton Davis, who's been their best cover corner so far this year. I'm worried about this Lions defense going into the playoffs here. And this is a Bears offense that's played much better in their home games. In fact, look at the graphic. You can make the argument that the Bears have been a pretty good offense at home. 24 points per game, 5.7 yards per play, 50% success rate. Specifically, Caleb Williams throwing the ball much better at home. Over 62% success rate per dropback, an average pass rating of 96.3, over 210 passing yards per game. So Caleb Williams specifically has been much better at home in Soldier Field. The Lions blitz a lot, as I'm sure you know. 4th in blitz rate. Caleb Williams actually has been better against the blitz. His numbers when not blitzed are pretty awful, but when blitzed, 28th in completion percentage, 24th in yards per attempt, 22nd in pass rating, 1st in turnover-worthy throw rate. He's actually been better when blitzed. So it really might not be that bad of a matchup for Caleb Williams. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears are able to run the ball a little bit. Look, we're talking about the Lions versus Bears. One team is much better than the other team, but on the road at Soldier Field, I don't think this line should be 6.5, 7. I think this should be closer to 3.5, 4. So I bet the Bears. I have Bears plus 7. I have Bears plus 3.5, and I have Bears money line. I got a Bears ladder here. I'm on Chicago. Bears up. Next game. Minnesota on the road in Seattle. The Seahawks are catching a flat 3 at home. Total sitting at 42.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Minnesota side. Over 70% of the tickets, money a little closer to even, about 55% of the money on Minnesota. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's start with a couple trends here. Minnesota 1-7 in their last 8 matchups against the Seahawks. They have covered 3 of them, though. 3-4 against the number. As far as their last 5 trips to Seattle since 2012, they're 0-5. Straight up, you actually have to go all the way back to 2006 to find the last time the Vikings beat the Seahawks in Seattle. Since 2012, they're 0-5 straight up, 1-4 against the spread in Seattle. But we're not interested in the past. We're talking about this matchup right here. We'll start with the Vikings offense against the Seahawks defense, and this matchup is actually a little closer than I would have thought. These graphics obviously show season-long numbers, and the Vikings offense 11th in yards per play, 10th in success rate. The Seahawks defense 14th in yards per play, 19th in success rate. So really not that big of a gap here between these two units. Now, this Seahawks team was playing excellent defense for a while there. It was looking like McDonald really figured it out. From weeks 9 to week 14, they were allowing just 17.6 points per game, 5.6 yards per play. Look at their numbers against the run in that span. 92 rushing yards allowed per game, 33.2% success rate per rush. So it was looking like Mike McDonald really had his defense together. They were healthier than they had been earlier in the season. So everything was looking up for this Seahawks defense. And then last week, they saw the Green Bay Packers at home on Sunday Night Football. I took the Seahawks money line. It was that story has a tragic ending. The Packers ripped Seattle apart. 30.6 yards per play, success rate over 52%. I will say, we're talking about the Seahawks defense here. In that game, the offense didn't really do the defense any favors. Geno Smith was pretty bad, and then he got hurt. Then it was Sam Howell, and good Lord, Sam Howell was really struggling. I'm not saying the defense played well or anything like that. It's just tough to play a good defensive game when the offense is giving the ball right back in 3 plays. So what I mean by that is I'm not going to let this one game erase the previous 5 where Seattle was playing excellent defense. This is still a defense I think is pretty good. So I still have faith in the Seattle defense. I'm not letting this one game change that. So will they be able to stop Minnesota from running the ball in this game? Well, the Vikings, as you know, they started off the season running it well, and then there was a while where they couldn't run the ball at all. Last 4 games, they are running it a bit. 4.7 yards per carry, 106.3 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush just under 44%. These are solid-looking numbers. Got to point at the opponents, though. The Bears twice, not the best run defense. Arizona, bad run defense. Atlanta, not the best run defense. So they've had a fortunate schedule in terms of their last 4 opponents, but let's give them some credit. They have been running the ball. Do I think they can run the ball in this game against Seattle? I would lean towards no. This Vikings run game as a whole over the last couple months hasn't been that consistent, and the Seattle run defense, like I said, there was that one game against Green Bay. Other than that, they've been really good. So I actually think Seattle is capable of taking the run away from Minnesota here. But what about Sam Darnold and the passing attack? Well, there was a 4-game stretch there where they were looking like the most dangerous passing attack in the NFL. Kind of came to a crashing halt last week. Last week against the Bears, it was a home game too. 5.8 yards per attempt, 74 passer rating for Darnold in the game. Still had a 65% success rate, so it's not like they were absolutely terrible. But in comparison to the 4 games before that, it's definitely a little bit of a wake-up call. And weirdly enough, you can kind of say the same exact thing about the Seahawks defense. Last week against Green Bay, Jordan Love had no problems completing passes. Over 123 passer rating, 8.5 yards per attempt. Success rate per dropback up close to 67%. In the 5 games before that, Seattle's been playing great defense against the pass. 6.4 yards per attempt, an average opponent pass rating under 80. And look at the opponents. Matt Stafford, Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray twice, Aaron Rodgers. It's not like they were playing scrubs. The Seattle defense, like we were just talking about, they were looking great against the run and the pass there. Just that one game against Green Bay. So kind of both of these units in the same spot. You got Minnesota, who looked unstoppable throwing the ball, had a real bad game against Chicago. And you got the Seattle pass defense that looked unstoppable, had a real bad game against Green Bay. So which of these units bounces back in this game? Well, I like this for Sam Darnold here. As we know, Sam Darnold likes to throw the ball down the field. That plays into the weakness of the Seattle defense. They're 23rd in DVOA against the deep pass. Sam Darnold, 12.7% of his pass attempts are deep passes. Also very efficient. 96.8 passer rating throwing the deep pass. So I definitely like that for Sam Darnold. Also, the Seattle pass rush, they're just 15th in pressure rate on the year, but as of late, they've been pretty good. pressuring the passer. This is probably a top 10 pass rush right now. Sam Darnold's been excellent handling pressure. I mean, second in yards per attempt, third in passer rating, sixth in turnover-worthy play rate. I am a little bit concerned about the pressure to sack rate, 22.5%, 32nd in the NFL. Might take a sack or two in this game, but as a whole, he does have solid numbers under pressure, which he probably will be under here against the Seahawks. What worries me for Sam Darnold in this game is right here. Since week 10, Seattle's been running a ton of too high safety. Since this defense has started playing better, a lot of too high safety looks, fifth most in the NFL since week 10. Why is that significant? Look at Sam Darnold's splits against single high safeties and two high safeties. Against single high safeties, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. 8th, 2nd, 5th, and 15th. Look at those same numbers against two high safeties. 23rd in completion percentage, 21st in yards per attempt, 12th in pass rating, 41st in turnover-worthy play rate. The Sam Darnold interception problems, they come against two high safeties, and Seattle's been running a lot of that. So although there should be opportunities for Sam Darnold to make some throws in this game, I think he's going to give us a pick or two in this one. But what about the matchup on the other side? Let's take a look at the Seahawks offense. And good news, we'll start with the injuries because that's kind of the lead story here, or it was the lead story with Seattle last week. Geno Smith got banged up. Kenneth Walker didn't play. Who else? Oh, the center also got hurt early in the game. All of them have been removed from the injury report. So the center's going to play, Geno Smith's going to play, Kenneth Walker's going to play. Seattle's offense is going to be at full strength for this one. Now, the Vikings defense is in pretty good shape themselves, except for Ivan Pace Jr., and we'll talk about that in a second. If you subscribe to this channel, you already know what I'm about to say about that. They've been missing him against the run specifically. But other than that, I think Harrison Smith is going to play. They should be good to go with the exception of Ivan Pace Jr. But anyway, let's talk about this matchup. We got Minnesota's defense against Seattle's offense. On paper, the Vikings definitely have the edge here as far as full season numbers go. Seventh in yards per play allowed, fourth in success rate. Seattle's offense 13th and 16th. Now look at the bottom of this graphic here. Minnesota, second in the NFL in yards per carry allowed, third in success rate per rush. Seattle, 21st in yards per carry, 25th in success rate per rush. There's no way the Seahawks can run the ball on the Vikings based on those numbers, right? Well, hold on. First of all, in the last two games, Seattle has been running the ball a little bit. In the last two games, they're averaging 5.4 yards per carry as a team, 128 rushing yards per game. But more specifically, what I want to talk about is right here. Since Ivan Pace Jr. has gotten injured for the Vikings, remember, we pulled up his PFF ratings. He's one of the best. He's one of the highest rated run defenders in the entire NFL. Since he's gotten hurt, the Vikings are having serious problems stopping the run here. 4.6 yards per carry, 142 rushing yards allowed per game, 46.4% success rate per rush. DeAndre Swift and the Bears were running the ball in this Vikings defense. This is supposed to be one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They don't look like that recently. In fact, they look pretty vulnerable to the run. So Seattle, healthy Kenneth Walker, healthy offensive line. They've been running the ball the last couple games. Charbonnet even looks pretty good. I think the Seahawks can run the ball on the Vikings in this game. But obviously, the main matchup we need to look at on this side of the ball is right here. Geno Smith against Brian Flores and the blitz packages. Nobody blitzes as much as the Minnesota Vikings. They're first in the NFL in blitz rate. Geno Smith under pressure, 57.1 passer rating, 34th in the NFL. He's also 24th in pressure to sack rate. Don't like that. That being said, there are some angles I really like here for Geno Smith. Number one, we just mentioned how the Vikings blitz more than any other team in the NFL. Geno Smith is actually better against the blitz. He's third in the NFL in completion percentage, 9th in yards per attempt when blitzed, 11th and 19th when not blitzed. So he's actually been better when blitzed. But check this out. This is what I really want to show you right here. What do the Vikings do? I mean, we know what Brian Flores does. He's done it for years. He blitzes and he sits in cover two. Fourth in cover two frequency, first in two high safety frequency. Why am I bringing this up? Because guess who one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL is against cover two? Geno Smith. Sixth in completion percentage, fourth in yards per attempt, fourth in turnover-worthy throw rate, fifth in pass rating. He cooks on cover two. He's completing 80% of his passes, over 9.2 yards per attempt. I know. The thought of backing Geno Smith at home is sickening, especially after what we saw Sunday night. You don't have to tail if you don't want, but I'm doing it. Give me the 3. Give me the Hawks. I'm riding with Geno again. I know. It's a sickness. It's a sickness. Seahawks +3 next game. San Francisco on the road in Miami. The Dolphins are catching 1.5 at home. Total sitting at 44.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, tickets are coming in on the San Francisco side over 60%, but the money's coming in on the Miami side over 65% of the money on the Dolphins. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with some trends. San Francisco has not had problems playing the Dolphins in the past. Since 1980, they're 9-3-1 against the spread against Miami. In their last 5, 4-0-1 against the spread. It's also mostly gone over. 6-2 to the over in the last 8 matchups between these two teams, including 4 straight overs. So 49ers and over has been the bet in this particular head-to-head matchup, but we're not interested in the pass. Let's talk about this matchup right here. 49ers offense against the Dolphins defense. On paper, these two units are pretty close. 49ers are 5th in the NFL in yards per play, 14th in success rate. Dolphins are 10th and 14th, so pretty close here. Obviously, the lead story with this 49ers offense has been injuries. Trent Williams is ruled out. He's going to miss another one. Brandon Ayuk, obviously, he's been out for most of the year. Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, also Guerrero. The RB3 is going to miss this one as well. So the 49ers are just banged up everywhere. They cannot catch a break on the injury front. So we have to take that into consideration when we're looking at numbers like this. Based on this graphic here, the 49ers should be able to generate push on the Miami defensive front. They're 6th in adjusted line yards, 1st in run blocking, grade 10th in yards before contact. But keep in mind, if we just look at recent data, the Dolphins have been elite against the run. In their last 8 games, they're allowing less than 84 rushing yards per game, 4.1 yards per carry, success rate per rush down close to 36%. And the 49ers run game is on the complete opposite trajectory here. In the first 10 games with Trent Williams on the field, they're averaging 5.1 yards per carry as a team, over 148 rushing yards per game. In their last 4 games without Trent Williams, just 98.3 rushing yards per game, success rate below 35%. So if you look at the full season data, it looks like the 49ers should be able to run the ball on Miami. But if you take into consideration the injuries and look at the last handful of games, it starts to look like there's no chance the 49ers can run the ball on Miami, which means there's going to be a lot of pressure on Brock Purdy to produce through the air in this one. And I do have some good news if you're betting the 49ers in this game. He's handled pressure really well. Miami has been generating pressure. They're 8th in pressure rate on the year. Brock Purdy 10th in yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating, 8th in pressure to sack rate. His numbers when pressured look pretty good. So that's a good start for Brock Purdy. He's handled pressure well. Miami will be sending some pressure at him. Also, this game is on the road. Brock Purdy has been much better on the road this year. On the road this year, San Francisco's averaging 9 yards per pass attempt, over 262 passing yards per game, success rate per dropback over 62%. So the 49ers passing attack has worked on the road. And as good as Miami's defense has been against the run recently, they've actually struggled against the pass. In their last 7 games, their average opponent passer rating is 97.6, success rate per dropback over 54%. So it should be a favorable matchup here for Brock Purdy. That being said, the weakness of the Dolphins defense is the deep pass. Brock Purdy without Brandon Ayuk, don't see a ton of downfield passing. So I don't like that for Brock Purdy. Also, Miami's been running a lot of cover 2 recently. Since week 10, they're 2nd in the NFL in cover 2 frequency. Brock Purdy, not that he's terrible against cover 2, but the big time throw rate drops down to 23rd, so even less downfield passing against cover 2. So do I like the matchup for Brock Purdy? Not really, but Miami has struggled to stop the pass, so Purdy should have some opportunities in this one. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Dolphins offense against the 49ers defense. These two units pretty close as far as year-long numbers go. 49ers are 4th in the NFL in yards per play allowed, 22nd in success rate. Dolphins are 20th and 13th. Both of these units, though, when we're looking at full season numbers, probably should take them with a grain of salt. Dolphins played a chunk of this season without Tua, and they were absolutely terrible offensively in those games. And the 49ers have played a big chunk of the season without Hufanga, without Bosa, without Greenlaw. So both these units have been really injured. So I don't really know what to take away from these full season numbers. Here's the problem. Miami is still dealing with serious injuries on this side of the ball. Austin Jackson, the right tackle, has been out. Terron Armstead may miss another game. He's listed as questionable, and the Dolphins have really missed him. We'll talk about that in a second. But also Kendall Lamb, who's their 3rd offensive tackle, he's listed as questionable as well. Now, I think Kendall Lamb's going to play. He's been practicing, but I really don't know. So Miami is still dealing with all these types of injuries, and look at the passing production without those offensive tackles. On the road in Houston, they were held to 4.9 yards per pass attempt, a 60 passer rating, just 196 passing yards in the game. And this is a Dolphins offense that hasn't been able to run the ball in forever. Since week 10, they're averaging 2.9 yards per carry as a team. 2.9. Under 59 rushing yards per game, 35.6% success rate per rush. So the Dolphins haven't been able to run the ball in a month and a half. Really makes it tough to have faith in this offense, especially when the 49ers defense is finally healthy and they're starting to play well. In their last 2 games, they allowed just 3.6 yards per carry, 34% success rate per rush. And it's not just a run defense. I mean, look at their defense in the last 2 games total. They allowed just 12.5 points per game, 4.6 yards per play in their last 2 games against the Bears and Rams. So the 49ers defense seems to be getting their shit together. Like I said, they're healthier now than they have been this entire season. Now, if you are looking to bet Miami, you can point at the fact that San Francisco has been struggling to pressure the passer for most of this year. They're 28th in pressure rate, 30th in blitz rate. Although Tua does have some solid numbers under pressure this year, the turnover-worthy play rate and pressure to sack rate, that's concerning. So the lack of a pass rush from the 49ers is definitely a positive angle for Tua and the Dolphins offense. Also, I mentioned before that the 49ers don't blitz a lot. They're 30th or 28th in blitz rate, whatever it is. Tua is much better when not blitzed. 16th in yards per attempt, 8th in pass rating, 13th in turnover-worthy play rate when not blitzed. 49ers don't blitz much. So there are a couple positive angles here for Miami offensively. The problem is with all those injuries, with the uncertainty at offensive tackle, no Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill is banged up. It's just tough to have faith in the Miami offense, especially when they're going to have no run support whatsoever. And this 49ers defense, Dre Greenlaw and Nick Bosa are both listed as questionable, but both have practiced, so I think they're both going to play. This is the healthiest this 49ers defense has looked all year. They've played back-to-back great games, so I think they should come into this one and play well. I like the 49ers in the game. I also like the under. Haven't bet either yet, but I think I am going to pull the trigger on that under. Check this out. So since week 8, the 49ers and Dolphins are 31st and 32nd in pace. Since week 8, these are the 2 slowest paced teams in the NFL. So yeah, I'll take that under at 44.5. It's a little low, but if this is going to be a really slow-paced game and both offenses I don't really trust, I like both defenses, I'll take the under at 44.5. I also lean towards the 49ers. I'm not sure if I'm going to bet that one, but I will place a bet on the under. I'm out of time. Obviously, wish I could get to a few more games. As always, we'll go through every single game on the board, 11 a.m. Eastern time on the live stream. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Going to post all my bets on the website. In fact, I have a bunch of them up there already. If you want to go check that out, it's at KyleKirms.com. Click on Open Bets and then click the View Open Bets button after that if you want to go check that out. Let's have ourselves a great NFL Sunday. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.